Welcome, welcome to the Curating Consciousness series of Maritime History Society, a 43-year-old academic initiative of the Western Naval Command of Indian Navy. I am Niranjan Oak, Senior Research Associate at Maritime History Society. Curating Consciousness is a series of conversations to curate maritime awareness among the people. Today, we are going to talk about coastal fort situated in Ratnagiri district of Maharashtra, Suvarnadurga. The session will try to explore various aspects related to the history of strategically important Suvarnadurga. Let me introduce today's guests. Our first expert is Commodore Odakal Johnson, Director, Maritime History Society. Commodore Johnson was commissioned into Indian Navy on 3rd August 1987 after attaining a second mate certificate in Merchant Navy. A navigation and aircraft direction specialist, he is an alumnus of Defence Services Staff College, Wellington, and of College of Naval Warfare, Karanja. In addition to key command and staff appointments over a range of naval units, the officer has undertaken significant work in military wargaming as also in leadership cum behavioral studies. He is a qualified interviewing officer for Services Selection Board. His PhD is on effective governance of multilateral operations, implications for contemporary international politics from Department of Civics and Politics, University of Mumbai. Commodore Johnson is also visiting faculty in Mumbai University and at the Naval War College. He has presented several papers on international maritime theory and India's maritime heritage. He has authored a book titled Timeless Wake: The Legacy of Royal Indian Navy in World War II and co-edited a compilation titled Essays in Maritime Studies Volume 3, both published by Maritime History Society Mumbai in 2013 and 16 respectively. At present, Commodore Johnson is posted at Mumbai as Curator Maritime History Society. Our next expert is Miss Aishwarya Vivek Devasthali. Miss Devasthali is an archaeologist by profession having interests in history, culture, tourism, and arts. She has completed masters in ancient Indian history, culture, and archaeology from Deccan College Postgraduate and Research Institute, Pune in 2017. After her post-graduation, she has worked with Archaeological Survey of India as an archaeologist for 2 years. Currently, she is associated with MHS as Project Research Associate. In 1 year of her tenure at MHS, she has participated in various in-house and outreach activities of Maritime History Society. She has presented and published her work in various webinars and compendiums, such as Delhi Series Sea Power Seminar organized by Indian Naval Academy and Safeguarding Underwater Cultural Heritage organized by UNESCO. Recently, she published her article in Marine Engineers Review titled Lothal, a testimony to nautical knowledge. Currently, she is working on maritime heritage of Konkan coast with peculiar reference to the built heritage. The session will be moderated by Mr. Rahul Joglekar. Mr. Joglekar is a journalist and filmmaker based in London. He has worked at BBC for a decade as a reporter and specialist on Indian diaspora affairs. He has also written for NDTV, The Times of London, New York Times, and Time Magazine. Mr. Rahul is a visiting lecturer in media studies at University of Westminster in London. In his spare time, he devotes time to researching facets of India-UK history. Let me hand over the floor to the panel and over to you, Mr. Rahul Joglekar. You can begin the fascinating discussion. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you all very, very much for making the time and for holding this session. It's indeed an absolute pleasure and honor to be in such great company and to be talking about a really fascinating subject. I mean, unlike the present company which I'm in, the August company that I'm in, I'm a storyteller. Unlike the experts, and for me, even this subject actually started with a story, and the story is that of discovering a castle quite by accident here in London, and finding out a little bit more about that, and going into the history and the historical links that this castle had, which is called the Seven Group Castle here in Greenwich. And it has a fascinating history and a very fascinating backstory to where that name comes from, and to where the story begins, and where it is today. So, without further ado, or spoiling the suspense, as it were, why don't we dive straight in? And I want to start off by asking you, Commodore Johnson. Obviously, this is a fort which is based in Maharashtra. But why is it important to study forts?
Thanks, Rahul, both for the opportunity and understanding the purpose. I think when we look historically in the evolution of security and defense, even we look at the entire development of built structures to defend, fort settlements were always a very important component of military settings from very early times. In the Indian context specifically, when you come to the medieval era, it was a time of political churn with a number of wars and interactions for military supremacy. Whether it was terrain, say on top of a mountain, or sometimes some of the lake palaces and fortresses, or obviously coastal and island structures, the fort is an institution that enables defense for the party or the ruling segment that is within the fort. But our story is in the maritime domain. And here the connect is all over to the oceans and to those living along the coast or maybe even on an island. So protecting such coastal or maritime resources makes the study of a coastal region very significant. And as I mentioned, when we come to the medieval or more close to the pre-modern era, some of the Indian dynasties, even in particular the Mughals who were there for a long time, had what is today called a sense of sea blindness. Now, it's not that they were totally blind to the sea, but the attention was higher onto the land on continental matters. And though India had an ascendancy, by the time we come into the period that we are looking at, there were others, Arabs, the Moors, the Chinese, and others were having a greater sway across the Indian Ocean. And it is in this context when what is commonly called in the continent as the age of discovery, the continental powers, with Portuguese taking the ascendancy, decided to make inroads and occupy their objects of interest. In this entire story, initially the Kunjali Marakkars in the Malabar coast, and then closer to what we are discussing, the Marathas and the Maratha armor, with some of the concept enunciated by Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj and his fascination about terrain. And I think he is one person who really placed emphasis on forts, fortresses across. Either he built coastal forts, he took over forts, or he repaired and refurbished forts. So when you come to Vijayadurg, Sindhudurg, and many of these structures, you see an evidence of great defense along hillocks and also overlooking the coast. So what happens? The Maratha Navy becomes stronger and well entrenched with very similar understanding what was growing across the world in many parts of the globe this whole idea of coastal defense, a fortress-based defense, and significantly after the time of Shivaji, by the time you come to the time of the Angres, the flotilla part of the Maratha armor becomes stronger, but probably the attention to the fortresses declined. So in studying Indian history, Indian maritime heritage, forts play a very, very significant role.
So that was absolutely excellent, because I think that really kind of gives a real good, sort of background to actually the development of how forts came to be. I mean, as you correctly said, sort of going from being sort of almost sea blind to developing a strategy, and sort of you see that transition sort of happening in the periods that you described. Let's zoom in a little bit, if we can, on this particular fort, that is Suvarnadurg, and what is the story of Suvarnadurg, and I wonder if Aishwarya, you're happy to sort of take this question.
Sure. So, firstly, now when you are asking this question, I think I must make you aware about the region where Suvarnadurga is placed, because it has played the most important role, I feel. So, firstly, the whole region where the fort is located, it is the Konkan region, and due to its geographical setting and location, it formed one of the most strategic locations of India during that time. You can easily understand that it formed the link between seas and the land, the whole region of Konkan, and that was the reason why it was the heart of trade and commerce. And if you just scroll through the maps, ancient ports, medieval ports, lot of ports flourished here. And as we can understand, a strong ascendancy of prominent rulers from ancient period to modern, such as Mauryas, then Nalas, Shilaharas, Chalukyas, then Kadambas, Portuguese, Marathas, British, ensured rich tapestry of built structures. And however, it also means that this area was considered significant for occupancy, and that is the reason why there are a lot of forts built here. And now, if we talk specifically about Fort Suvarnadurga, it is very interesting. If you split the word Suvarnadurga, it means golden fortress. So Durga means Durgama iti. So the place where one can't reach very easily. So Suvarnadurga has that kind of importance. It is one of the most considered as one of the most striking forts in Ratnagiri district. It was also important because there was a port, Harnai port there. So if you see at Suvarnadurga through a sky view or Google Earth images, you can understand it is just a small, based on low irregular island, maybe 8 acres of land it might have used, and it is surrounded by a huge wall or a rampart. And there are a lot of documentations carried about Suvarnadurga, and it consisted of lot of defense architectural features, like it has 24 bastions. The fort has irregular in shape. Then the doors of fort are much protected so that one can't what you can say, enter the fort easily. It has secret escapes, or in Marathi we call it as a Chor Darwaza. Then garden rooms for soldiers, and many things. And it was considered, as I said, it is considered as most striking forts of Ratnagiri, and this is also mentioned by Britishers in their accounts and letters. So that is the interesting part of Suvarnadurga. It was one of the most important fort, and we have a lot of Maratha chronicles which speak about the fort and its importance.
Wonderful, wonderful. Which is great, actually, because that segues really well into my next question, Aishwarya. Because so I mean, we know now that the forts developed and how important they were. We now know about this particular fort and why it's so important. Let's let's go back. Let's sit in a time machine and go back to the time when the British were sort of scanning. This is the East India Company, which was scanning the waters near the fort and Maharashtra. So who owned the fort? Who controlled the fort at the time? And what was the sort of milieu? What was going on at the time? What year are we talking about? And talk to me a little bit about the kind of background of what was going on there, please, if you may.
Yeah, it's a good question actually. Lot of political things happened here. So initially, Fort Suvarnadurga was under occupation of, or it is said that it was built by kings of Bijapur, but we don't have lot of sources which can say it. But it is considered that it was built based on architectural features. And later, it is said that it was repaired and strengthened during reign of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, and it came to prominence during Kanhoji Angre, and Kanhoji Angre was groomed, trained here under the Kiledar of Suvarnadurga, the person who uh, owns, or not owns, we can say, who guards Suvarnadurga, is the important person of a fort. So, for his extensive efforts and achievements, he received a title as Sarkhel during that time only. So, at that time, he was ruling, or under it, Suvarnadurga was under him. And later in 1696, it was also a station of Kanhoji Angre's fleet as well. And then it was formally under King Shahu by in year 1713, I think. And during the reign of Tulaji Angre, the successor of Kanhoji, it became one of the seats of his power. And that is the time when it resulted in damage of various Indian and foreign ships. And Tulaji Angre, we can say, he emerged as a terror among contemporaries by using Fort Suvarnadurga. But later, a joint effort was made suppressing the Angres by the English and Peshwas. And in 1755, after the joint attack, came into hands of British. So that was the short story of how what all happened before British takeover of the fort.
Wonderful. It's a really good background and story. I mean, so clearly we now know that there was a lot of toing and froing going on for the control of this one fort by the East India Company and by the rulers of the time. Talking about the rulers of the time, and this is as you mentioned, Kanoji and Tulaji Angre. And you said something very interesting. You called him a terror among his rivals, which also sort of means that he was obviously a very skilled a maritime man. Talk to me a bit about who this person is. Draw a picture for me if you may, because in a lot of British records that actually are even used to the present day, he is described as a pirate. And obviously, the way history is written, one man's pirate is another man's admiral. So, but talk to me a bit about that, if you may, Aishwarya, please, about who this man is. Who is it that the British defeated? And talk to me a bit about him, please, if you may.
Sure. So right now you had just a glance of political history before about the fort before it went to British. So you might have understood that after having a glance of this history, I think we can imply that Angres were the one who played a very important role in history of Suvarnadurga, and they are also credited for not only strengthening the fort but establishing a shipbuilding yard at Suvarnadurga. We have few sources which say that there was a shipbuilding yard during Kanhoji's period, and creating a large fleet of warships and securing the west coast from attacks of French, Dutch, Portuguese, British sea warriors and colonial powers. So one thing we must note that it is also when we talk about contributions, it is important, or it is inferred basically, that Kanakadurga, Fatehgarh and Goa fort, these are the forts which are very near, like immediately near at the coast of Suvarnadurga. They were primarily built by Kanhoji Angre to defend Suvarnadurga from any enemy attack from the land route. And with the sound foundations laid by Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, the Maratha fleet took a boost after his death. But we can say from 1699 until eclipse of the Angres, the influence of Angres over this land or Konkan region, it appears to be very strong. And it can be said that the maritime saga of the Angres began with Kanhoji Angre, and then it went till his later successors. There is one British, I found one reference that by British historian Grant Duff. He ranks Angres Navy first and English Navy second in that period. And it is very interesting to note that. So now, who were these Angres basically? Now that is the question. So little is known about the family and early days of Kanhoji Angre. His daring activities and skilled seamanship, I would say, and it is addressed by European writers. So Angre, as his family name was Shankapal, was a Koli or a fisherman from a tiny village in Angarwadi in Mawal Hills of from very near to Pune. And Tukoji Shankapal was under service under Shivaji Maharaj, and maybe around 1650s or something like that. And he had distinguished himself in his service. And Kanhoji Angre is said to have first opened his eyes in Suvarnadurga fort, and that is the place where he watched Maratha ships coming and going out for open seas and falling upon the enemy's fleet. And this is the place where he received practical training about wars or something, defending the ports and other such things. So Kanhoji Angre later became an admiral of Chhatrapati or the Royal Maratha period, and he had every right to levy tariff, to force ships of all nations to purchase his passport, and to negotiate with any power he liked. So, but these rights had to be executed by the simple rule of might. And Kanhoji, who had risen to this power, he had justified it. He had just proved him. So if the Siddhis, the Firangis, or they in Marathi sources we know call them as Firangis, they were British, and the Topikars, who were Portuguese, acquired territory, carried on trade, and ruled the waves on the authority. That how could Kanhoji's right, I can say, be questioned if he was the admiral or the person who was owning this territory? So Kanhoji is mentioned in foreign records as one of the most daring pirates that infested the Malabar coast and made commerce hazards, or he was treated as a danger for these parts. And English and Portuguese, in addressing Kanhoji as a pirate, I personally think that they have simply betrayed their hatred, maybe because of he was a problem for them. But one can understand that this person or this man was a true maritime icon, and he wrote, like, not only him but later his successors, Angres, weren't a pirate but reputed seafarers, I would prefer calling them, who rose to important naval positions, creating their identity as maritime icons, who gave a tough fight to keep a safe sway over the land, like, and keeping the colonial rule away. So, but we can say that their terror was such that they were mentioned as pirates in foreign writing. So it's a very interesting story about Kanhoji Angre and his successors. And it's no doubt that they were termed or they were defined or something, like they were called as pirates. So that's all.
Interesting, very interesting. Yeah. So reputed seafarers is your interpretation, which is and quite a different way of looking at it compared to what being described as pirates.
Yeah.
But let's step back a moment and Commodore Johnson, if I wonder if I can bring you in here and to talk a little bit about sort of the context of this. So we obviously this is all going on with a certain context that around sort of maritime security and around and we're talking this is 16th, 17th sort of century century history. So talk to me a bit about the Marathas and their attitude towards the seas and their attitude towards all that's going on in the period that we are talking about.
Thank you, Rahul, and that's a good place to set context. It is actually fascinating to see the kind of research work that you heard, Aishwarya, and what we've been trying at the MHS, and a lot of sources to bring. But you're right. To get the context right, you need to step back. And if you see the entire journey of the Deccan, or what we today call Maharashtra, it is first an amazing gift of creation of terrain, ranging from mountains and mountain ranges to seas, creeks, rivers, and everything. And the epitome of understanding as a sovereign, the idea of geography and territory, is Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. And even he was called, in today's language, a guerrilla, whereas he was a master of terrain. And so that is why sometimes in academic parlance, and I would say sometimes even Indian academics can be forgiven to kind of continue the sin of terminology which is out of context. If in today's context we are looking at the term pirate, today there's a UN Convention of the Laws of the Sea where the definition of pirate has nothing to do even with terrorism. There is an issue of a privateer. There is the whole legal concept, which I will not go into. So the word admiral also, which we are ascribing, we are taking an admiralty construct. If you look at it right from the times of Arthashastra or a lot of medieval writings, the way, I mentioned the Marakkars, they were just boatmen. So the phraseology has to be contextualized. And I like what Aishwarya said about seafarer, but can I say, I'll take it a step further. Even Shivaji Maharaj, who had probably a few naval excursions and was a maritime visionary, and Angres were the epitome of sea warriors because they knew how to master the sea, they knew how to reach into the territory, use advantage of maneuver, which is today whether in land battle or in coastal battle. And they continued. By the time you come to the 18th century, you see the extent of the Maratha Empire, or I should say the Maratha Samraj. It was covering almost the entirety of India. So that very context of geography and the understanding of military power to retain the governance construct, one segment of that is your key story of Suvarnadurg, the Golden Fort, what Aishwarya described, and Sarkhel Kanoji Angre. He was given the title Sarkhel. We have loosely translated into Admiral. I would probably call a Sardar of the sea, if I were allowed. So, but we have to get a common phrase. So, the Angres, as rightly Aishwarya has researched on and shared, were really an epitome, which is a continuing legacy from the Satvahans, from the Cholas, Rajrajendra Cholas, from the Marakkars, and continued through in many other unsung components. And so there is no way academic historicity would use the term pirate. They were sea warriors and defenders of their region.
No, that is I think that injecting that bit of context actually is really important, Comrade Johnson, because I think phraseology has the tendency to look at things from how we define them today, isn't it? But actually, these are obviously stories that we keep revisiting in different time contexts and have better understandings to revisit the same events many years and many centuries later. So I think that is that bit of context was actually really necessary, and I think it's really important to be able to sort of see it in that light with that lens. I want to bring in, actually, you mentioned something very interesting about, we spoke about Chhatrapati Shivaji, and then we spoke about sort of his, kind of vision, as it were, if we call it that for the sea. Obviously, by the time the Angres were in charge and were running things, things were obviously much more sophisticated, and the story is obviously much more complex in terms of strategy and in terms of what we see developed. Let's reflect a little bit, if it's possible, first with you, Aishwarya, and then back to you, Commodore, about the Angres. I mean, who they were, what their place in history is, and your own kind of personal view on their kind of place in maritime history in India. Aishwarya, if you want to go first.
Yeah, so when we sing glories about our past, I think we often forget our heroes who make history. And I think maritime heroes or our naval heroes are usually unsung, and they have significantly influenced the course of history from past. So and here, if we talk about Angres or Sekhoji, the successors of Kanhoji Angre, may it be Sekhoji Angre, Sambhaji Angre, Manaji, Tulaji, they maintained their father's tradition of seamanship, and they carried that legacy ahead. And there are so many heroes, like they have played a lot of important role in the history. And I think we need to make a more research on it, like a really good research on it, to bring their contribution ahead. Because really, when I was studying about Angres, for unfortunately there was really few sources which mentioned about them. So yeah.
Okay, I'm going to throw in one question, which is obviously a bit of an extempore question, and Aishwarya, feel free to take it as you like. In the battle that ensued between the East India Company and Tulaji Angre, what do you think was the sort of turning point? Was it military might, or was it a strategic making of alliances, or was it a mix of all of that turned the tide in favor of the East India Company, or what exactly is what is your analysis?
Well, I think it was both. If you just go through the history, because strategy, military might, and maybe you can say we remained. I can't remember that word, how to describe it. But then, if you go through the story, you can understand the plan or the joint attack. It was planned by Angres, British, and the Peshwas. So there was lack of unity. This can be one established fact, which led to defeat of Suvarnadurga. And secondly, one important thing is, as Sir said, ki geography was very important in this battle. The as the fort was very important and it was not been easily conquered, this was the time when they both came together, and it was a joint attack, both made from waters as well, and equally from land. And I think that was something which was a turning point for defeat of Suvarnadurga. Or this, I didn't come across anywhere that it was planned in any other defeat or capture of the fort. So it was completely
Yeah, that's really good.
strategy. And yeah,
That's why I wanted to throw that in, just to see what your analysis was.
yeah.
But I want to continue to talk about the Angres, actually, because Commodore, tell me, what do you think? Oftentimes, what tends to happen is that in the story of and the storytelling of history, often when an event like this happens, when A defeats B, often B is sort of almost written out of history a little bit because of various reasons. Let's not get into those reasons, but basically, in this case, we're obviously talking about the Angres, who had a very illustrious sort of history, and their legacy continues to remain really inspiring. But do you think that they've sort of been written out of history a little bit, or are not celebrated enough, or are sort of almost kind of ignored a bit? What's your view on that, Commodore?
In fact, Rahul, I'll have to completely have a contrary view for a few things. Even taking off from what Aishwarya said, though the closure of the prominence of the Angres did happen when the existing land sovereign did not see eye to eye with the seafaring component. That story had happened even on the Malabar coast and a few other cases. You know, Maharashtra itself carries a legacy of many dynasties, many rulers, from the times of the Mauryas, Satvans, the Guptas, the Chalukyas, Rashtrakutas, Shilas. I mean, there's a whole range. And they held sway over this part of the Arabian Sea for many, many years. And there is this whole realm of history and attractions. Now, Angre is fortunate. Maritime History Society, one of our base support organization, is an establishment. We use the term stone frigate, the Indian naval ship Angre. Okay, what better is our entire support comes. It was HMIS Dalhousie, became Indian Naval Establishment Ship. We just call it Indian Naval Ship Dalhousie. And shortly after independence, the name was changed to Angre in tribute to Sarkhel Kanoji Angre. Across the Raigad district, the entire part of North Konkan, today, if I'm not mistaken, it's the 9th dynasty. Sarkhel Raghuji Raje Angre is a great friend of MHS. And we have named an establishment, and I think we remain indebted for the fact that the effectiveness of their tactics, and they were really good in small ship tactics, targeting the larger fleets, hiding in the creeks, as playing terrain, or in this case, the sea to their advantage, that they remain remembered as a better component. There are many other unsung heroes in Indian maritime history, but fortunately, Angres don't fall into them, except for this great, great, I would call it service by this wrong word which you mentioned earlier, pirates. But in Indian readings and Indian history, particularly what the Navy has done through the establishments such as Maritime History Society, they remain significant. When we today take any maritime heroes, as Aishwarya was talking last year, we did a whole program on the maritime icons, and Sarkhel Kanoji Angre and his sons continue to be icons of repute, and that is why he is a part of our study. And the Suvarnadurg story cannot be detached from the story of Angres.
So that was absolutely enlightening, and thank you very much. I think it requires people like yourselves with just a few, I have to say, gray hair, to be able to offer that level of context and history, and correct us others who feel as if history has been a bit unfair in the storytelling aspect. But actually, that's not true at all. As you've pointed out, actually, there is that level of acknowledgement and celebration, actually, of the contribution, and that's actually quite heartening to know. I want to talk a little bit, if I may, about this. We spoke about the story of Suvarnadurg, and this is entirely, obviously, kind of focused on that particular fort, and sort of it fell to the British once the Angres were defeated. What happens after that? I mean, does that fort, does it still retain its importance? Is it still Suvarna golden fort, or what happens next in the chapter of this story?
Well, may I?
Yes, Aishwarya.
Yeah. Yeah. So after the fort was won by British in 1755 by Commodore William James, according to an agreement which was made earlier, Commodore William James made over Suvarnadurga to Peshwa government on I think it was April, and in 1802 there was a reference that Suvarnadurga was residence of Bajirao II for few days as well. Later, there were many attempts made by Maratha Sardars to try to get back Suvarnadurga from them, but Britishers were successful, and they used to just take it back to Peshwas. After death of Sir William James, I think that might interest you. Lady James was the one who built a memorial to him for exploits at Suvarnadurga. I think, if I'm not wrong, it's at Shooter's Hill. But in India, we are not much aware about the other side of the Sevendruk Castle. So, but to talk about Suvarnadurga, in 1818, with other forts as well, this fort also went, or it was gained control by Colonel Kennedy from Peshwas, and this itself suggests that how the fort gained a fame, and then again it went under ruins. So after 1818, maximum forts of Konkan, especially, they went under ruins. Later in 1910, I think it was tagged as a monument of national importance. It is now under central government or Archaeological Survey of India and tagged as monument of national importance. So that is the story of Suvarnadurga, and right now it is just open for tourists. People in Konkan are much aware about history of Suvarnadurga. They respect this place, they respect the deeds by Angre family. It is like Suvarnadurga is equal to Shivaji Maharaj and Angre family. So that is the case in Suvarnadurga especially. So, but if you just have an overview, after British control over Suvarnadurga, later it came into ruins, and nothing much happened about the fort because it was very difficult to maintain the fort as well.
Sure.
So the shift from forts just moved towards administration and building of other infrastructure, modern day infrastructure, I would say.
Wonderful,
So
wonderful,
yeah.
interesting, very interesting. I mean, it's sort of we started with as Commander Johnson said about sort of sea blindedness to a time when actually the Marathas almost sort of reinvented what sea power could sort of be, and probably be in their present time a real sort of shiny example of what a navy at the time could look like. And then obviously once it comes under British control and sort of India comes under British control, it sort of becomes slightly less important and fades into from the consciousness of lots of people. But obviously still being discussed in 2021, which means that it is still very much an important part of our joint stories and joint histories. One last word to you, Commodore Johnson. A closing thought, if you may, just to sort of conclude and sum up what we've spoken about today. And then, and before I do that, may I very quickly say an absolutely massive gratitude to you, to Aishwarya, to Niranjan, and the entire team at MHS for doing this, because I think having these conversations is so essential, and finding people like yourselves who are such experts in this area, and I think fierce protectors of the story is I think a real opportunity for me, and I really feel absolutely privileged to have had this conversation with all of you. So I'll hand it back to you, Commodore Johnson, and thank you for your expert and absolutely really impressive grasp of knowledge and sharing that with us. So thanks for that, and thank you, Aishwarya, for your wonderful insights, and Niranjan for your expert MC qualities. So thanks to all three of you.
Thanks, Rahul. All I need to say is that the very opportunity that we've had is a result of a number of factors. We have on the back end, my senior researcher said, Niranjan, trying to coordinate some of these studies and activities. And you've just seen a small glimpse of the volume of effort in research that Aishwarya has done. There is much more, but we have to pack it. And thanks for opportunity and interest, Rahul, that you show. And we are very hopeful that the story will go far. But ultimately, this entire series, Curating Consciousness, to us is the need to tell the maritime story of India. In fact, across the globe, a portion which is 71% of the planet deserves greater attention, and the people who are on the coast. And that is what we are trying to do. So instead of the sea blindedness of the past, we are saying promote sea mindness. And that is where say partner with us at MHS. And we believe the rightful place of maritime stories ultimately stories matter will take place. So thank you, Rahul, for this. And with that, I'll hand back to Neeraj.
So thank you, the whole panel, Mr. Rahul Jogolkar, for your crisp questions, and Commodore Johnson and Ms. Aishwarya Devastari for your subject expertise. I mean, this is a niche subject, and we at Maritime History Society, we continuously endeavor to study all these niche subjects related to maritime domain in particular. So that was such a fascinating discussion about Suvarna Durga and the broader theme of ports, heritage, and Indian maritime history. I'm sure that the discussion must have helped increase maritime consciousness among the viewers. So that's it for today. Do subscribe to our channel for more such interesting discussions. Thank you so much. I am Niranjan Oak, Senior Research Associate at Maritime History Society, and thank you on behalf of Maritime History Society.